Buenos días. Vamos a iniciar en este acto académico como acto inaugural de la Cátedra Santo Tomás de Aquino en esta Facultad de Teología San Vicente Ferrer de Valencia. Y como no puede ser menos, vamos a iniciar este acto inaugural de la Cátedra de Santo Tomás pronunciando una oración del propio Santo Tomás. Oh inefable Creador nuestro, altísimo principio y fuente verdadera de luz y sabiduría, dígnate infundir el rayo de tu claridad sobre las tinieblas de mi inteligencia, removiendo la doble oscuridad con la que nací, la del pecado y la de la ignorancia. Tú, que haces elocuentes las lenguas de los pequeños, instruye la mía e infunde en mis labios la gracia de tu bendición. Dame agudeza para entender, capacidad para retener, método y facilidad para atender, sutileza para interpretar y gracia abundante para hablar. Dame acierto al empezar, dirección al progresar y perfección al acabar. Oh Señor, Dios y hombre verdadero, que vives y reinas por los siglos de los siglos. Amén. Sin más, doy la palabra a Fray Martín Gelabert para que nos haga la presentación de la cátedra y nos presente al conferenciante de este acto.
Vale, muchas gracias, Padre Provincial, Vicegran Canciller de la Facultad. Gracias también al señor Obispo don Javier Salinas, al Vicario General, por su presencia y, por supuesto, a todos ustedes, profesores, alumnos, amigos de la Facultad. Bien, para mí es un honor presentar la Cátedra Santo Tomás de Aquino de esta Facultad de Teología. Este es el acto oficial de su presentación, aunque no es exactamente su primera actividad. La primera actividad que organizó la cátedra fue la conferencia impartida en este mismo salón el día de la fiesta de Santo Tomás. La cátedra fue creada por la última junta de facultad que se celebró a comienzos del presente curso escolar. El objetivo es claro: tener una plataforma de investigación, enseñanza y difusión del pensamiento filosófico-teológico de Santo Tomás y de la teología inspirada por él. El campo, por tanto, es muy amplio y ambicioso. Evidentemente, no se trata de hacer arqueología ni de recrearse en el pasado. Se trata de dar a conocer el pensamiento de Santo Tomás, teniendo bien presente que su pensamiento tiene capacidad de diálogo con la cultura actual y que sus principios pueden aplicarse a los nuevos problemas que van surgiendo en el campo eclesial y teológico. Se trata de situar a Santo Tomás en su contexto propio y en sus posibles prolongaciones en nuestro contexto actual. Para esta presentación oficial de la cátedra contamos con un reconocido especialista en Santo Tomás, que es el profesor Michal Paluch, actual rector magnífico de la Universidad de Santo Tomás de Roma. El profesor Paluch se licenció en Teología Dogmática en Cracovia y posteriormente, en el año 2001, se doctoró en la Facultad de Teología de la Universidad de Friburgo, con una tesis dirigida por Jean-Pierre Torel, en la que estudió la doctrina de la predestinación en la obra de Santo Tomás de Aquino. Michal Paluch ha sido profesor en el centro que la Orden Dominicana tiene en Cracovia y director del Instituto Tomista de Varsovia entre los años 2002 y 2010. En julio de 2013 recibió la habilitación en Filosofía por la Academia Polaca de las Ciencias y desde el año 2017 es el rector magnífico de la Universidad Santo Tomás de Aquino de Roma. Es miembro, entre otras instituciones, de la Sociedad Internacional para el Estudio de la Filosofía Medieval y de la Pontificia Academia Santo Tomás de Aquino. Entre sus muchas publicaciones, voy a citar 3 o 4, yo tengo aquí 10 folios con la lista de sus artículos y libros y de sus actividades académicas. No se preocupen, yo en 2 minutos he acabado. Como siempre, yo siempre soy breve. Bien, entre sus muchas publicaciones, tanto en revistas especializadas como libros, voy a destacar algunos títulos que tienen relación directa con Tomás de Aquino. La profundidad del amor divino es un título de un libro editado en París en el año 2005. El título es La profundidad del amor divino, evolución de la doctrina de la predestinación en Tomás de Aquino. El libro está en francés, editado en París. Otros títulos, La encarnación y el mesianismo, está en italiano, publicado en Florencia. Sobre la verdad en Tomás de Aquino y los dominicos y el desafío del tomismo, ambos libros publicados en Varsovia en 2012. Y finalmente cito su última, no sé si su última no, una publicación reciente del año 2017, Santo Tomás de Aquino y Duns Scoto, sobre la contingencia, la libertad y la individuación. Bien, antes de darle la palabra, quiero hacerles notar que después de la intervención del profesor Palug, leeremos una carta enviada por el eminentísimo señor cardenal Cañizares, gran canciller de nuestra facultad. Me ha dicho personalmente que lamentaba mucho no poder estar aquí. A veces el don de bilocación, pues, no lo tenemos. Bien, leeremos, digo, una carta enviada por el gran canciller de nuestra facultad en la que con palabras muy sentidas se adhiere a este acto y manifiesta su apoyo a esta cátedra. Y una cosa más. Tienen en sus manos el primer folleto, vamos a decir, la primera publicación de la Cátedra Santo Tomás de Aquino. Si abren el folleto por la página 7, podrán seguir mejor la conferencia en inglés. Y para los que tenemos más dificultades con el inglés, podemos abrir el folleto por la página 25 e ir siguiendo la traducción en español de la conferencia, en la página 25. Bien, gracias, Mijal, hermano, profesor, maestro, por haber aceptado nuestra invitación. Tienes la palabra.
Reverendísimo Monseñor Javier Salinas, reverendísimo y querido Padre Prior Provincial, ilustro decano de la Facultad de Teología, querido Padre Martín, director de la cátedra, profesores y estudiantes. Buenos días a todos. Por desgracia no hablo español, así que me dirigiré a ustedes en inglés. Quiero daros las gracias por vuestra invitación. Es para mí un honor y un placer presentar esta conferencia. How to be a magister and a student, Aquinas' model. We live today in a world in which we keenly experience a desire for figures of authority, a master, of the Latin magister. But unfortunately, it is not easy to satisfy such a desire. When we try, we often do so in a rather awkward, let's say wild and woolly way. We choose figures of authority from among sectarian gurus, popstars, or awkward political tricksters. As we will see, St. Thomas understands the function of a magister, master, in a very balanced, courageous, and if we consider that we are speaking about a medieval author, in an unexpectedly modern way. I am convinced that his proposal is still relevant, although, because of some reasons I will mention later, it is much more demanding for us today to follow his guidance than it was for those living in the Middle Ages. If you are thinking about the relationship master-student in the Middle Ages, we usually have the image in our mind's eye of an experienced monk giving advice to young people entering religious life. They need to listen to the instruction given by the master in order to obtain the treasures of wisdom. The search for spiritual truth consists in entrusting our freedom to an experienced guide who leads us for a sufficiently long period of time to enable us, in our turn, to be able to help the next generation. This ideal of growing in wisdom can, for sure, be found in the Middle Ages, especially in the monastic traditions. Furthermore, although in a different way, to some extent, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, follows this path with his proposal of spiritual direction. But the ideal formulated by Aquinas differs from this proposal in a quite essential way. But before I present Aquinas' proposal, I would like to outline the context in which he developed his position. It is worth knowing what kind of problems provoked his thought and helped it to grow. In trying to explain the role of a teacher in the transmission of knowledge, Christians were confronted from the very beginning with two problems. First of all, they had to find a way to relate to St. Matthew's passage, 23:8. Quote, "You are not to be called Rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brethren." End quote. In the light of this text, the title of a teacher, magister, is reserved only for God. It should not be used for man. Obviously, this difficulty was quite easily solved. The next line of the same chapter says that no man on earth should be called Father, because there is only one Father who is in heaven. It would be absurd to draw back in everyday life from the use of the title Father in our relationships to earthly fathers. So the literal interpretation of the rules given here by Jesus could be understood as inaccurate. Even though the use of the title was not problematic in the end, there was still the task of giving a clear and convincing explanation of how a teacher, God, relates to a teacher, man. The second problem was even more basic and general. What does it really mean to transfer knowledge to another human being? How does it function? As is often the case with our fundamental experiences, we are convinced that we know very well what it means to transfer knowledge and how this functions, as long as we do not need to explain it in a very precise way. How is it really possible that the whole spiritual sphere that we have in us may be shared with the soul of another human being? What is the source of the knowledge being transferred? From where in us does it come? A theory formulated by Plato became of crucial importance for the response given by ancient and medieval authors to this second set of questions. For Plato, a human soul existed not only after the birth of the human being, but even before its union with the body. Such an understanding allowed Plato to interpret the acquiring of knowledge as anamnesis, it is to say, as a process of reminding oneself of what the soul always, before the birth, contained in itself. According to such a theory, knowledge was innate, it had always been inside the student, and the master's task was just to awake it, activate it in the student's soul. Thomas was obviously not the first Christian author who had to face the question of how to understand the relationship between a master and a student, and how to understand the nature of teaching. Before him was Saint Augustine, who set the tone in the Occident for this kind of reflection in his famous dialogue De Magistro, making use of the Platonic theory, but trying to reconcile it with the above-mentioned requirements of St. Matthew's Gospel. According to the Bishop of Hippo, the earthly teacher, by his words, stimulates the minds of his students, guiding them to the interior truth. But the teacher in the full sense of the word, is only the eternal truth, the eternal wisdom. It is to say, Christ given to us in the depths of our hearts. It is in such a way that true wisdom is located in us. A human teacher can only help us to stir it up. And the most accomplished act of acquiring knowledge is the interior contemplation by which Christ, the divine teacher, grants us his light. In time, because of the image of constant turning towards to the source of light, this theory was named Illuminism. Aquinas. Aquinas follows, and yet at the same time doesn't follow, Augustine's track. He follows the Bishop of Hippo because the role of the divine teacher in a similar way remains stressed and crucial in his interpretation of the acquirement of knowledge. He doesn't follow Augustine because his theory in a more precise way underlines the role of the external reality in this process. Learning is not limited for the angelic doctor to only a kind of activation of what we already have inside. Besides that, the most groundbreaking move is his understanding of the divine teacher. According to Aquinas, the human being is from the beginning endowed by God with a kind of divine spark, the capacity to know, an intellectual light. Thomas names the source of light in us, following Aristotle, the active intellect, and he will recognize in it, quote, a kind of reflected likeness in us of the uncreated truth, end quote. Quedam similitudo in create veritatis in nobis resultantis. The active intellect allows us to light up the reality around us thanks to the innate, known in the immediate way, first principles. It uses them as a craftsman employs his instruments. This divine spark, working according to the first principles, is the basis of all our knowledge. It is given to us by God. God himself is in this way the first and the most profound cause of all knowledge. Nevertheless, in order to acquire knowledge, the active intellect has to light up the world outside. It contains in itself a kind of framework for receiving all knowledge, first principles, but it is only through contact with the outside world that our knowledge may grow and develop. Let us take into consideration the difference between Aquinas' understanding of acquiring knowledge in comparison to Plato's theory undertaken and developed by Augustine. First, acquiring knowledge doesn't consist in turning to the self, entering inside of the self. It becomes possible thanks to the contact with the external world. Second, for Augustine, the true teacher is Christ present in our hearts. For Thomas, the teacher is our intellect, the divine spark in us, the most noble sign of God's presence in mankind. This sign of divinity in us is not a filled content of knowledge that we can activate, but it is rather a capacity enabling us to illuminate the external world around us. The reformulation of the theory of acquiring knowledge proposed by Aquinas may seem today obvious for us, a commonsensical move in the reflection of the nature of acquiring knowledge and wisdom. But Étienne Gilson recognized in it the greatest philosophical discovery in the Western medieval tradition. According to the new proposal, Knowledge of the external reality was no longer a luxurious addition in the process of acquiring it. The new theory opened the way for the development of different experimental sciences. What is even more important, authentic knowledge was not only more connected to the need of some internal confirmation by a kind of separate intervention of the illuminating God. It was reason itself that turned out to be a permanent, lasting in time, and the most extraordinary intervention of the Creator. Such a new insight must have led to the recognition of the dignity and independence of the human being endowed with such a gift. In the light of Aquinas' interpretation, God entrusted us with a relative, because depending on him, autonomy of reason. And it is exactly this autonomy of reason that is the most important and profound sign of our likeness to him. If we understand Thomas' thoughts on acquiring knowledge, we can come back to the relationship master-student. Aquinas makes a distinction between two ways of acquiring knowledge. We can either do it on our own, using the light received from God, the active intellect, and the first principles. This way of acquiring knowledge is called discovery, inventio. Or we can as well assist the process of acquiring knowledge with some external help, involving a teacher. In such a case, we should speak about learning by instruction, disciplina in Latin. On the one hand, discovery has a perfection that learning by instruction has not. It highlights our capacity and different gifts. On the other hand, learning by instruction has some advantages that discovery cannot offer. It usually allows us to attain the desired purpose much more quickly, the same objective that without the help of a teacher we would need much more time and effort to achieve. Of what does learning by instruction, disciplina, consist? A teacher should propose to a student a set of signs, words, texts, by which he would be able to go through the process of acquiring knowledge that has been already accomplished by the teacher himself due to his own mind or due to another teacher. Quite obvious description. Nevertheless, it's very important, and I'm arriving to one of the crucial elements of Aquinas' theory, that the student is only helped to execute his own process, his own process. This process cannot be reduced or eliminated by jumping to conclusions, by presenting to the student only some of the fruits of the efforts made by the others. Aquinas is very firm about it. Trying to explain the task of a teacher, he compares him to a doctor. It is well known at the time of Thomas that it was not a doctor who healed. It was the organism. Thomas speaks about nature, natura, that heals the sick. All the medicines and advice given by the doctor should only assist the organism. It is the same in the case of teaching and understanding. It is the intellect of a student that has to acquire the knowledge and to understand it. The teacher's task is only to assist this process. Thus, we should be attentive that the teacher, a man or woman, has the appropriate place in the process. Quote, "We are forbidden to call man a teacher in the sense that we attribute to him the preeminence of teaching, which belongs to God. It would be as if we put our hope in the wisdom of man and didn't rather consult divine truth about those things which we hear from man. And this divine truth speaks in us through the impression of its likeness, by means of which we can judge of all things." End quote. Let's notice Thomas calls the human reason, I quote, divine truth that speaks in us through the impression of its likeness, end quote. We cannot set the human teacher over our own reason because the reason is our divine teacher. Such a way of thinking about our acquiring knowledge and about the relationship to a human master has very important consequences. If the crucial gift that we have received from the Creator is our reason, we can neither deny nor neglect it. In our quest to acquiring knowledge, the recognition of some figure of human authority should not become for us an excuse to jettison our own responsibility in the search of truth and making right choices. Attempting to do it has to be understood in the light of Aquinas' theory as the lack of the respect for the biggest gift that we have received from the Creator. Compared to the monastic understanding of the relationship master-student, Aquinas' proposal is groundbreaking. It emphasizes the dignity of every man. It requires respect for the gift of the intellectual light that has been granted to each one of us. The master can never replace the student in his search for knowledge and wisdom. The master should lead the student from the beginning, dependence, to self-reliance. It must be added that it was much easier to put into practice the ideal presented here in the 13th century than it is today. This ideal had its place in a cultural and spiritual setting that helped one understand that the light of the human reason is a gift of God. I'm not thinking here only about the level of saturation of the medieval culture with Christianity, although it's of crucial importance. I'm thinking as well about a system of studies proposed at a medieval university. In my opinion, a medieval university took account of all the elements that are essential in the process of acquiring knowledge and wisdom in a better way than contemporary schools. Let's take the example of the University of Paris, considered at that time one of the most important intellectual centers of the Western world. The Faculty of Theology, considered as the most important one, was divided into schools which were headed by masters responsible for the program and the work of the whole team assisting them. It is quite astonishing for us today that the description of the master's obligations was formulated so very briefly. Perhaps it was not necessary to be more specific because of the strong competition between the masters at that time. Anyway, in the 13th century statutes, we find only 3 verbs describing their tasks: to read, legere, to dispute, disputare, and to preach, predicare. As you can imagine, behind each of these verbs, we find a different institution of the faculty created for the needs of acquiring theological knowledge. To read, legere, meant in fact presenting commentaries on Holy Scripture, the most important of the tasks of a medieval theologian, the point of arrival of his entire endeavor. The master should proceed in a systematic way, chapter by chapter, reserving the best slot of time in the academic program for this kind of classes. The classes of reading the Scripture usually took place at the beginning of the day, just after morning prayer. To discuss, disputare, referred to the famous discussions organized by the medieval masters, questiones disputate, that had clearly defined proceedings. They were usually divided into 2 parts. During the first session, 2 bachelors assisting the master would start the discussion by presenting all possible arguments in favor of the two solutions. The theme of those discussions was usually formulated as a yes-no question. Each of the bachelors had the task of defending one of the solutions. The master listened to their debate without being involved in it. During the next session, that took place usually the next day, the master had the floor. He presented his own position, the right solution, in his opinion, of the problem under discussion, determinatio magistralis. And afterwards, he referred to all the arguments presented the day before. He had to reject the arguments in opposition to his position, but sometimes, if he considered those of the bachelor to be insufficient, he presented as well his comments and criticisms to the arguments in favor of what he wanted to claim. It is worth keeping in mind that the discussions concerned quite often very subtle and complicated questions and provoked a huge intellectual effort. The records conserved, not only in the case of Aquinas, are very extensive. They contain sometimes a dozen, sometimes several dozens of arguments pro and contra. To preach, predicare, meant the sermons of the masters to the students. Every Sunday and solemnity, the students were bound to participate in the Eucharist with a sermon, and at Vespers, which included a conference. The preserved fruits of Aquinas' preaching are rather modest, if we compare them with the other parts of his impressive work. But we have the whole set of conferences preached by Saint Bonaventure during Vespers in the 1260s, engaging in a very important quarrel between the masters of the Faculty of Theology and those of the Faculty of Philosophy, Faculty of Arts at that time, on what was the correct interpretation of Aristotle. These records allow us to imagine how much panache some liturgical discourses had and how great were the problems they attempted to tackle. If I present here the different ways of work at the Faculty of Theology at the University of Paris in the 13th century, I'm doing it because, in my opinion, the model of work, articulated with leggere, disputare, predicare, expresses in a very concise and precise way the medieval ideal of the transmission of wisdom. The point of departure must be listening to tradition, the perusal of inspired authors. The second element of the intellectual formation is the discussion that should open the way to intellectual illumination and absorption of the received truth. The point of arrival is the liturgical witness about the truth received in the tradition and understood in the discussion. Receiving the truth of the tradition, its understanding, and giving a witness about it clarifies the way that should be followed by the masters of the Faculty of Theology with their students. Does not this ideal correspond with the project of life perpetuated in the self-definition of Jesus? I am the way, the truth, and the life. John 14:6. At the beginning, we have to set out in the search for truth. It's the purpose of listening to the tradition. Then we have to understand and intellectually accept it, the truth, in order to experience and to share it as a life-giving power. It seems to me that only such a rich understanding of transferring knowledge and wisdom allows the reason to discover its autonomy without blurring its vocation. If we limit its task only to intellectual speculation, if the disputare is cut away from the leggere and, first of all, from the predicare, the way of using our reason will have to degrade. Before the conclusion, a tidbit. It just so happens that we have Aquinas' commentary to the above presented model of the master's work at the University of Paris. Among Thomas's works, we can find the so-called Principium. It is to say, the opening address that each newly nominated Master of Theology had to deliver in front of the faculty on the day of his promotion. In the case of the Dr. Angelicus, his speech must have been profoundly printed in the memory of all those who attended it. Because of the hot rows between the secular masters belonging to the diocesan clergy and the religious ones who at that time were gaining year by year a stronger foothold in the university, Thomas was able to deliver his speech only thanks to the escort of the archers sent by the Saint King Louis, a devoted supporter of the mendicant orders. Aquinas decided to comment on the passage of the Psalm 103:13. He watereth the hills from his chambers, the earth is satisfied with the fruit of thy works. The choice of this passage by Thomas may be illuminated with an anecdote that is well confirmed. It comes to us from 3 different sources during the canonization process of the Dr. Angelicus. When Thomas was nominated to the position of Master of Theology, he was only 31 or 32. As we know, the date of birth of Aquinas remains uncertain. So according to the statutes of the University of Paris, he was too young for the job. In the light of the rules, a master should have been at least 35. Because of his young age, and certainly as well because of the tensions at the faculty, Aquinas didn't want to accept the new task. Nevertheless, being bound to the vow of obedience and by the will of his superiors, he had to proceed according to their decisions. At this time, he went for a moment of fervent prayer. One of the accounts informs us even that he was praying in tears. After this prayer, during his sleep, he had a dream with some senior Dominican brother who comforted him and proposed to him the subject of the opening address. His contemporaries identified this brother with Saint Dominic. The background for Aquinas' interpretation of the psalm passage, I recall you, he watereth the hills from his chambers, the earth is satisfied with the fruit of thy works. So the background for Thomas is an idea derived from the pseudo-Dionysian writings about the different levels of mediations in the diffusion of the good to man. The diffusion of good, which is wisdom, has as well its own hierarchy. Thus, wisdom flows down first to the masters. The hills are their image in the quoted passage. Then, due to the teaching activities of the masters, wisdom continues its path to their audience, the students. They are depicted as the earth by the psalmist. Having introduced such an interpretation of the quoted text, Aquinas can continue his address with a description of the right attitude and demeanor of masters and students. Because of the greatness of the transmitted doctrine, those who are called to mediate on the transmission as masters should be appropriately worthy. Their dignity embraces 3 aspects. First, they should be high, be in the ascendant, thanks to their eminence of life, that they might be worthy to preach efficaciously, esse debent alti per vitae eminentiam, ut sint idonei ad efficaciter predicando. Second, they should be enlightened, that they may fittingly teach through their reading, debent esse illuminati, ut idone doceant legendo. And third, they should in the end be armed, that they might refute errors in disputation. They should be muniti, ut errores confutent disputando. The expectations formulated by Thomas concerning the attitude of the masters are strictly connected with the tasks they have to undertake, predicare, legere, disputare. Nonetheless, it is worth noticing that the capacity to preach, give witness thanks to the eminently virtuous life, is located by Thomas as the first desired quality. One can see that the speech was delivered by a friar from the order of preachers. What should be the right attitude of a student? I have already mentioned that in the light of Aquinas' interpretation, the audience of a master is represented in the psalm passage as the earth. One can see that the speech, so the students should be like the earth, which is located low, stable, fertile. It is to say, they should be first low in humility, infimi per humilitatem, because where humility is, there also is wisdom. Proverbs 11:2. Second, they should be firm with the rectitude of the senses, firmi per sensus rectitudinem. And third, they should be fruitful, as the words of wisdom understood bear fruit in them. Fecundi, ut percepta sapientiae verba in eis fructificent. And then Aquinas explains what these qualities should serve for. Quote, humility is required of them with respect to the learning that comes from listening. Rectitude of the senses with respect to the judgment of what is heard. And fruitfulness with respect to discovery, by which from a few things heard, the good listener pronounces many things. As one can see, in the same way as it was in the case of the masters, Thomas formulates the expectations addressed to the students, keeping in mind the three verbs defining the duties of the master. It is striking, though, that this time the succession of the verbs is different. It corresponds with the basic order proposed by the statutes of the university, legere, disputare, predicare. The master should stand out by the virtuous life, necessary expertise, and the capacity to lead discussions. The student should be humble. Humble, it's the first thing. Attentive thanks to the internal integrity, it's the second thing. And creative. There we have the way Aquinas understands the attitudes of masters and students at the beginning of his teaching activity at the University of Paris. Conclusion. The subject of this talk has been chosen because of the present crisis of authority figures. This crisis is connected without any doubt with the divinization of the human reason. The modernity made out of the reason the highest and ultimate instance in our search for wisdom and knowledge. What happened afterwards? It seems that reason left on its own is either a tyrant that behaves in an appallingly cruel way, or a kind of Hamlet thinking all the time about suicide and the possibility of leaving us to uncontrolled irrationality. Human reason alone does not suffice. There we have the wisdom of the postmodern era, the wisdom which we had to pay too generously with the human suffering during the last centuries. Because of all that, it might seem to us that the only right solution today should be driving the reason to abdication, compelling it to accept the yoke of authority and to resign of its former prerogatives. This is not the way proposed by St. Thomas and his disciples. The solution for our times is not and will never be a resignation of reason or looking for its acquiescence in a sectarian divinization of some guru, nor the imposition of some faith on reason by force. All these solutions are only drugs that with time deepen our frustration and slavery. We need rather to help reason to rediscover that it was not created to adore itself, but to entrust itself. La raison non est faite pour s'adorer, mais pour se donner, as Charles Journet wrote many years ago. In other words, in order to attain its maturity, reason has to admit that it is a gift from the Creator and its autonomy, rightly belonging to Him. It is the most important gift of the Creator, making us in His image, is and remains forever the relative autonomy. Reason will be able to attain and confirm it only if it recognizes that it has its source and its cause in God. It is the approach we learn from Aquinas, but I must add, it may be discovered only if the model of transferring wisdom is shaped in a similar way as it was at a medieval university, and if it's a harmony of three elements: listening to tradition, intellectual speculation, and witness of life. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias por su atención y deseo lo mejor para esta nueva cátedra de Santo Tomás que hoy inauguramos.
Muchas gracias, Mijal. Realmente excelente. La razón fundamental de tu intervención la has dejado para el final, pero nos has ido de alguna forma invitando a introducirnos en un proceso de reflexión al modo de Santo Tomás, donde a través de él nos recuerdas la importancia que tiene nuestra confianza en la razón, porque es un don de Dios, pero al mismo tiempo es un valor autónomo, relativo, como también decías, ¿no? Y gracias sobre todo también por ese camino para glosar o enriquecer el intelecto activo con esos tres verbos, ¿no? Leer, discutir, predicar. Yo soy el camino, la verdad y la vida. Excelente. Por la profundidad y por el modo tan, digámoslo así, tan acertado que has tenido de organizar las ideas y la exposición en esa relación entre el maestro y el discípulo. Y ahora voy a dar la palabra a nuestro decano presidente, Vicente Botella, para que haga lectura de la carta que el gran canciller, don Antonio, pues nos ha enviado para este acto.
Es una carta fechada precisamente en el día de hoy, 27 de marzo, y dice así: Hoy vais a comenzar oficialmente el inicio de las actividades de la recién creada Cátedra Santo Tomás de Aquino en la sede de nuestra Facultad de Teología San Vicente Ferrer. Os felicito por esta iniciativa y le auguro a la cátedra grandes y sazonados frutos para nuestra facultad y para la diócesis de Valencia y la Orden de Predicadores, sus patrocinadores, que este año celebran el 6º centenario de la muerte del insigne dominico y gran valenciano San Vicente Ferrer, patrono de nuestra Facultad de Teología. Siento muchísimo no poder asistir a este acto. Otros compromisos pastorales previamente adquiridos e inexorables me lo impiden. Disculpadme ante todos los presentes en este importante, significativo y prometedor comienzo. Tener en esta facultad una cátedra especial sobre Santo Tomás de Aquino es un signo de lo que quiere y debe ser nuestra Facultad de Teología, dominicana y diocesana, eclesial en todo caso, que está llamada a colocar en el centro luz y guía de sus actividades académicas y de sus enseñanzas y quehaceres al aquinate, verdadero gigante del espíritu y del pensamiento humano, sin duda, una de las cotas más altas de humanidad de todos los tiempos, una de las más altas cimas que domina el complejo de las más altas cumbres del pensamiento teológico de todos los tiempos. Dios actuó en él, su gracia y su sabiduría se manifestaron en él. Él marcó el objetivo, mejor, el fin fundamental, más aún el único de la existencia humana, la búsqueda de Dios. Pero sabía que cuando el creyente entra en relación profunda con Dios, no puede contentarse con vivir de un modo mediocre, según una ética minimalista y una religiosidad superficial. Tenía que vivir conforme a su verdad, ser imagen y semejanza de Dios, tal como Dios lo creó y lo quiso. Ahí está su secreto, ahí está el núcleo del verdadero cambio, el germen y el fundamento de una nueva humanidad, Dios mismo. Porque ahí está la verdad del hombre, donde se asienta la verdadera civilización. Esta es la verdad del hombre. Está hecho por Dios y para Dios, y su corazón está inquieto y lo busca hasta que en él descanse. Su alma tiene sed de Dios, del Dios vivo, como la tierra reseca y agostada, y no se contenta con menos que Dios. En conformidad con ello, vive de acuerdo a la voluntad de Dios, a su querer inscrito ya en su naturaleza y revelado plenamente en su Hijo. Ahí se condensa la más verdadera y genuina antropología y la verdadera sabiduría de la que andamos tan carentes en nuestro tiempo. El verdadero problema de nuestro tiempo es la quiebra de humanidad, o sea, la falta de una visión verdadera del hombre, inseparable de Dios, y el vivir consiguientemente conforme a Dios. Por eso la quiebra moral y de humanidad que hoy padecemos está unida inseparablemente a la crisis de Dios, a su ausencia del espacio humano y cultural. Todo cambia si hay Dios o no hay Dios. Dios y el hombre inseparables. Conocimiento de Dios y vida moral de la mano. Qué importante e imprescindible es esto para una facultad de teología como la nuestra. Las enseñanzas de Tomás de Aquino, al situar a Dios en el centro, moral ocupa un lugar muy importante, la secunda secunde. Con esta obra él dio comienzo a una nueva era en la teología moral, puesto que logró incorporar el pensamiento ético y clásico a una nueva antropología cristiana, a partir de Dios en el centro, origen y fin. Y logró insertar la moral en una visión teológica en la que la síntesis de fe y razón, que no confusión, pero tampoco contraposición, está en su fundamento y en su horizonte. Santo Tomás de Aquino pudo prestar este servicio a la teología cristiana escrutando a fondo la naturaleza del hombre, imago Dei, inseparable de Dios. Y con ello prestó el gran servicio también a la par, escrutando la naturaleza del acto humano, fruto de la voluntad libre del hombre que actúa voluntariamente propter finem. Estar con Dios, tener a Dios, vivir en Él y con Él, actuar conforme a Él, conforme a la imagen que somos de Él, es anticipar la meta, es el cielo. Solo desde Dios, solo a partir de Él, la tierra llegará a ser humana. La tierra será habitable por la luz de Dios. Allí, donde se cumple la voluntad de Dios, puede la tierra convertirse en el cielo. La razón, iluminada por la fe, nos conduce a la verdad, que nos hace libres. Razón y fe van de la mano, como nos muestra el Aquinate. Necesitamos volver a Santo Tomás de Aquino por tantas y tantas cosas y motivos. Lo necesitamos para encontrar y fundamentarnos en la síntesis que creó en su formulación de las relaciones entre la fe y la razón, en la fe que busca el entendimiento y en el entendimiento que busca la fe. Es tan grande la fuerza del ingenio del angélico doctor, tan sincero su amor a la verdad y tan alta su sabiduría en la investigación de las más altas verdades, en su ilustración y concatenación, que su doctrina es un instrumento muy eficaz no solo para asegurar los fundamentos de la fe, sino para experimentar útilmente y con seguridad los frutos de una sana evolución. Su ciencia filosófica, que refleja la esencia de las cosas realmente existentes en su verdad cierta e incambiable, no es ni medieval ni propia de una nación particular. Trasciende el tiempo y el espacio y no es menos válida para toda la humanidad de nuestro tiempo. Él, Santo Tomás de Aquino, es un maestro que hoy también sigue siendo actual y, si tenemos en cuenta la difusión de tantas opiniones falsas o discutibles, hasta providencial. Por eso es providencial esta cátedra que hoy comienza su andadura. Qué bien haremos en seguir en nuestra facultad a Santo Tomás de Aquino, fuente inspiradora de los documentos pontificios sobre las facultades de teología y de otros textos magisteriales importantísimos como Fides et Ratio o Veritatis Splendor, que son como pilares en los que se asienta o debe asentarse para edificarse sólidamente la Facultad de Teología San Vicente Ferrer de Valencia. Damos gracias a Dios por concedernos tener muy presente aquí la memoria agradecida de Santo Tomás de Aquino y porque nos impulsa a seguir sus enseñanzas por medio de esta cátedra en nuestra facultad, que quiere seguir y aprender de él y de sus enseñanzas y recibir su inigualable magisterio. Y como dicen en la Italia natal de Santo Tomás, auguri. Un saludo afectuoso a toda la facultad, al vicerán canciller, Jesús, y especialmente a su director, el profesor emérito Padre Martín, en cuyas manos, muy buenas e inmejorables, por cierto, está su inicio, su destino y camino. Un abrazo cordial en Cristo Jesús, Antonio Canizares Llovera, arzobispo de Valencia.
Gracias, Vicente, por la lectura de la carta que nos envía el gran canciller. Y he de decir que en la primera conversación como provincial que yo tengo con don Antonio, y ya me remonto al año 2016, año en el que la Orden estaba celebrando 800 años desde su fundación, digámoslo así, y estuvimos hablando sobre varios temas y entre ellos salió a relucir la figura de Santo Tomás. Y ahora, escuchando el texto, que no lo conocía, algunas de las cuestiones que él ahí señala me las había comentado en esa conversación. Tengo que decir que para mí, personalmente, al menos en mi fuero interno, me siento especialmente contento por este momento y por el inicio de esta cátedra, por muchas razones. Algunas de ellas pues, ya han salido, ¿no?, a lo largo de este acto. Pero sí observo cómo en la Iglesia, en la experiencia eclesial, a nivel internacional, hay como una fuerza de volver a leer puntos importantes de nuestra tradición pensamiento importante de nuestra tradición, de la tradición de la Iglesia, de la tradición cristiana, de la tradición teológica, porque lo consideramos necesario para el momento presente. Y me ha alegrado mucho las palabras finales de Mijal, donde volvemos o tenemos quizás la responsabilidad como miembros de la Iglesia y, por supuesto, desde las facultades de teología, de recuperar la razón, la confianza en la razón, conforme nuestra tradición nos ha ido enseñando, porque el mundo de hoy lo necesita. Uno de los objetivos de la cátedra, como muy bien señalaba su primer director, Martín Gelabert, no solamente es ir al pensamiento, digámoslo así, de nuestra historia en un sentido arqueológico, que está bien conocerlo, por supuesto, sino ver cómo podemos seguir bebiendo, actualizando ese pensamiento, porque lo necesitamos. No es un capricho, es una urgencia. Quisiera terminar con unas palabras de especial agradecimiento, pues no solamente a Vicente como decano, cuando yo le empecé también a plantear pues esta iniciativa y que lo fuera de alguna forma pues hablando con los profesores y con los diversos estamentos también, ¿no?, de la facultad. Y lo agradezco porque desde el principio fue muy, digámoslo así, puso mucho interés en ver cómo articular lo que hoy presentamos, ¿no? Y se lo agradezco también especialmente porque el trabajo lo ha hecho él. Yo he puesto una iniciativa, pero el trabajo lo ha hecho él. Y, por supuesto, un agradecimiento muy especial a Martín Gelabert. Que sea él el primer presidente de esta cátedra es un honor también, no solo para nosotros, no solo para la provincia de Hispania, especialmente también para la facultad, porque es donde él ha ejercido y sigue ejerciendo su docencia en todo lo que ha sido su vida académica, ¿no? Y tengo que decir que Martín Gelabert pues, es de los dominicos teólogos pues, más reconocidos en nuestro contexto y que leerlo, no solo escucharlo, pero también leerlo, pues es una gozada. Y lo digo con el corazón, ¿eh? No lo digo por quedar bien, porque no necesito quedar bien con él, como él bien sabe, ¿no? Pues bien, muchas gracias a todos vosotros por vuestra asistencia y vuestro interés. Solo me queda pues ya declarar inaugurada la Cátedra Santo Tomás de Aquino. Muchas gracias.